Hi everybody, in this video I'm going to be reviewing the 511 mesh overbust corset made by Orchard Corset. So here's the front, the side, the back, and the other side. So for the length and fit of this, from the center front it is 15.5 inches. From the peak of the bust down to the lap here at the princess seam is 16.5 inches. At the side seam here it is 14 inches, and at the center back it's the shortest at 13 inches. And today I'm wearing the size 20, which is a little mind-boggling to me because normally I fit size 24 in off-the-rack overbust corsets. But I spoke with Brittany at Orchard Corset and she said that the mesh tends to stretch a lot over time, so I could afford to go down one size or possibly even two sizes. And the very first time I put this on I was just like, heck no. And then as I wore it more and more over the last couple of weeks, actually, yeah, it is closing to about a parallel 2-inch gap in the back, so it definitely does expand over time. But of course I did remember to take measurements straight out of the box before it was ever worn. The waist did measure true, it was 20 inches. At the full bust here it was 31 inches, so it has an 11-inch bust spring. And then the hip here along the bottom edge was 34 inches, so it's a 14-inch hip spring. Now there's a little bit of asymmetry in my particular version. It's a little bit longer along this hip and a little bit bigger around the hip. Now that's kind of weird because this hip is actually a little bit bigger on me, but unfortunately it was stretched out. The mesh was stretched out, I think, when the binding was sewn on, so it doesn't quite fit me perfectly. So I would probably not wear this particular corset outside of my clothing, obviously except for this review, but I would wear this as a support, like waist cinching and bust support under a strapless dress, for instance. It's nice and breezy, it's great for summer. I can imagine a bride wearing this corset underneath their wedding dress because it comes in white mesh as well. So I would wear it for those types of purposes, but for me personally I would wear this type of corset under my clothing more often than not. When you first put on this corset, if your bust tends to look a little bit like wiggly or wonky like mine did, just make sure that you take the bones in the channels and take your thumb and just kind of like push it up the channel so that the top edge is flush with the top binding, and that should help shape the bust properly, and it won't give you a strange looking silhouette under clothing or anything like that. Now this corset is about 9.5 to 10 inches from the waist tape to the very top here. Now remember that I have a pretty long waist and a low situated waist, so my natural waistline is actually about an inch lower than where the waist tape is. So the waist tape is actually sitting on my lower ribs right now, and that's not too bad for me because I'm used to having my rib cage compressed. But for those of you who have a low waist as well and your ribs just can't take any kind of reduction, just keep this in mind. And if I were to take this corset and pull it down so that the waist tape were in line with my natural waist, unfortunately the corset would be too short from the waist up and would not really support my bust that well. So I just had to do a bit of a compromise for this sort of thing. So let's go to the tabletop portion of this review and I can show you all the details of this corset. Okay, so here is the 511 mesh overbust laid flat, and for the materials, like all mesh corsets, it is just a single layer of this black mesh here. I believe it's a polyester based and it has this hexagonal kind of honeycomb pattern to it. And then on the seams here, the mesh is sandwiched by a layer of black cotton twill here, and it seems to be a layer of polyester grosgrain ribbon on the back here. This is what the Orchard Corset label looks like, and this is the label that has the size, the fabric content, and the cleaning instructions. And this corset has a 6-panel pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Most of the bust curve is panels 1 and 2. Most of the hip curve is between panels 3 and 4 here, and 5 and 6 are just rounding up the back. And for the construction, the mesh panels were assembled together. They were just stitched at the seams, and then the seams were straddled by these strips of black cotton twill and the grosgrain ribbon on the back here. So the mesh is sandwiched in between those two, and because you straddle the seams, it reinforces the seam so that it is less likely to rip apart later on because, you know, mesh is very full of holes. And this is also repeated for the center front and center back to put a place for the busk and the back grommets. And the waist tape is very clearly visible. This is also a grosgrain ribbon, 1 inch wide, and it's a full waist tape extending from the center front here all the way to the center back. And you can see it's on the inside and it is secured down at each boning channel, at each seam here. Here's a close-up of the binding, made from bias strips of black cotton twill, machine stitched on outside and the inside. On the outside, you can see that they stitched in the ditch quite neatly, and on the inside, you can see that there's a necessary top stitch. And on the inside, there are also 6 garter tabs, 3 on each side. And the Modesty panel in this corset is a little bit over 5 inches wide, so that will cover a lacing gap of about 3.5 inches in the back. It's unstiffened and finished in just 2 layers of black cotton twill here. It's attached to the side of the corset if you don't like Modesty panels, and I know that Modesty panels can look a little bit odd under mesh corsets. You can just take your seam ripper and remove that. And by taking your seam ripper, you can also remove these tags in the back if you like. Also, do keep in mind that Orchard Corset does have a tendency to use this, I believe, hemming tape right here to secure down the Modesty panel before it's sewn down. And this comes off quite easily because the corset is new. But if you are intending to first keep your corset and secondly remove the Modesty panel, I would recommend doing that almost, as soon as you get it, after you receive it, and don't wait a couple of months or a couple of years to remove that, because the tape can leave a residue and it can be a lot more difficult to come off in my experience. And for the mesh corsets, there is no Modesty placket in the front by the Busk. The Busk in this corset is 14 inches long and has 6 loops and pins. The bottom ones are a little bit closer together, just by like a tiny amount, like 1/2 inch. It is 1/2 inch on each side, and it has a little bit of flexibility to it. And my particular corset has a total of 14 bones, 7 on each side, and that is not including the front Busk here. If you get a larger size, it will have more bones in it. I believe the number of bones kind of varies by size, but they do make sure that you have bones that are kind of equally distributed throughout the entire circumference of the corset, which is kind of nice. So single boned on the seams here with 1/4 inch wide spirals. And the center front here, there is enough space in the channel to put in a narrow bone, but this is just fabric. It's pretty flexible here. It's just the Busk in the center front here. And by the back grommets, obviously they are sandwiched by 1/4 inch wide flat steel bones, 2 on each side. There's a total of 24 grommets in the back of this corset, size 00 with a small to medium flange around it, pretty equidistantly spaced, a little bit more than 1 inch apart. All of them seem to be holding in pretty well. Here's the back of the grommets, and you can see the washers present. Most of them have rolled pretty nicely. There's a couple of splits, but they don't catch on the laces. Once again, all of them are holding in. And the laces are your typical workhorse black flat nylon laces here. They feel like the outside of paracord with the core actually taken out. It's a little bit of spring to them, but they're very difficult to snap or break. You can see that there is a lot of wear on this because I've worn this corset probably more than the others. But they glide well through the grommets. They hold the knots and bows securely. Once again, your typical workhorse. True to Orchard Corset fashion, the bunny ears are a little bit high on my torso, but they are kind of in line with the waist tape here. So that's why I'm hesitant to actually pull it down to my natural waist, because I will probably end up stretching out the mesh along this point if I place the bunny ears and a lot of tension right there.
The mesh CS-511 Overbust corset by Orchard Corset comes in black mesh like I'm wearing here, and also white mesh and red mesh. And it is available in waist sizes 18 inches closed waist all the way up to 40 inches closed waist. For sizes 18 to 32, it's $79 US, and for sizes 34 up to 40, it's just $3 more at $82 US. And as usual, you can use my coupon code CorsetLucy for 10% off your entire order. I don't get any kickback from this, so use it any way you want. I don't receive a commission from people using that coupon code.
And this concludes my review of the CS-511 Mesh Overbust by Orchard Corset. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned something new. If you did, please remember to click that like button down there as it helps support this channel. If you have any comments or questions about this corset or Orchard Corset in general, feel free to leave a comment down below. I'd be happy to get back to you or forward your questions over to Orchard Corset. And if you own this corset or another mesh overbust, let us know how you like it in a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.